I also noticed that speaking in different languages brings different personalities, or people who speak about different things, they behave differently. And that was always very interesting to me, how language is a big part of how we think and how we behave. And that just gave me so much to work with when I would compose. And then on top of that, the sounds of the words also. As a musician, right, we pay attention to the sounds. So I think what I love about working with text is that it has both semantics to work with, the meaning of the words, but also the sounds. And if I am able to have control over the text, then it's really fun thinking how it interacts with the music later on.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that in just a moment, but this idea of, fluency in different languages allows you to kind of embody different personalities almost. I have a friend,
Mm-hmm.
actually, she's been on the podcast, Anna Hufka. She is half Japanese, so she's fluent in English and Japanese. And that's what she described to me one time. She said, when I switch into Japanese, it's almost like I'm a totally different person than when I'm,
Mm-hmm.
and of course there's like the cultural aspects of, politeness and that sort of thing in different languages. But do you feel like, I imagine you've written text in different languages for your pieces. Do you feel like that enables you to take on different musical characters as well and personalities?
I think so. Yeah. I think I was thinking this morning, literally, that it would be kind of cool. And again, I'm speaking out loud. um, it'd be kind of cool to have a song cycle of the same text, but in different translations, and see how I would set it differently. I think the result would be quite different, or maybe not as different as I would think. I don't know. It feels like a cool experiment to
Yeah.
try and do that, because the same text could be perceived sarcastically, in one language, and then in another language it could be taken as literally. Again, depends on the culture. I think in Polish people tend to be way more sarcastic and kind of have this dry humor. They don't say positive things as much. So when they do, it might come off as mocking, right? But if I
Right.
were to use that in English, it would maybe have a more genuine intention behind it. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, totally. I'm not as linguistically inclined as you, but I've had my own interests in learning some language here and there. I actually have a piece that I wrote for our mutual friend Kevin von Kampen. I went to grad school with Kevin, and he commissioned me at that time to write a piece for vibraphone and voice. And it was just kind of a piece inspired by the Dada movement. So it was like really absurd in a lot of ways, very challenging, but something that he wanted as someone who would be playing vibraphone and singing and speaking while playing vibraphone is for it to be in different languages. And
Mm,
I think
wow.
the idea of, I mean, obviously you need like the right collaborator for that, but the idea of even within one movement switching between different languages, I mean, it's a really interesting thing to me.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And when I speak to my mom and my dad, I also switch languages, because it's just whatever word comes
Yeah.
first to my head, then I use it, and I don't think about what language I speak. But people who are around me, they always laugh and they say that, like, you sound insane.
I don't know. It seems like a superpower to me. I wish I could do that.
Well, then you run into the danger of not knowing any language very well,
That's true.
you
Yeah.
know? Yeah. Or you start to forget words.
So when you write for voice, you do often write your own text. How does the text that you write inform your music in general, whether that's sonically or formally, structurally, or expressively?
Hmm. So I usually start out with text. I think for me, starting out with text is really important. And then, not that music comes second, but mm, I feel like the text is the source of everything. And I mean, all of these, aspects that you mentioned, they influence the music in different ways. And, in some sections, one sounds of the words might be more important than the expressivity of the meaning of the words. Like all of these interact with each other throughout throughout pieces. And so having that fluidity also is very exciting. When do I decide to, focus more on maybe the music, the expressivity of the text, and when do I just care about getting through the text? Almost like thinking of it as a recitative. There's a difference too, I've noticed, between writing a song and writing an opera, where you really care about getting the narrative out and understanding the words. And other times where, in songs, I think we have more freedom to do more abstract things with the sounds of the words.
Can you talk about your experience with opera a little bit? Because that's such a foreign thing to me that I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, I actually, my opera is still sort of 75% done. I still have 2 more scenes to write, but it was a very big project, and I had so much fun working on it. I started, and I really wanted to kind of do everything from scratch, so I didn't take any existing story. I wrote a story with a friend, a collaborator, Modesta, who is also a pianist. I mean, we met at a piano camp, but then we ended up doing different things. I ended up, composing. She's now in art school. She's a wonderful graphic designer and visual artist. And so we created a story that was based on our collective interests. Mine was, clocks, time, fantastical, surreal themes. And her drawings also are very fantastical. And so we would meet every week talking about, how to advance the story. And then once the story was written, I wrote the libretto in English. That was also big for me because I hadn't written, I think, text in English before. It was only in Polish. So I had it checked by native speakers, whether there were any awkwardness or mistakes in English. And then when I started writing the music, even then I would go back and keep refining the libretto. So again, this constant process of editing. Of course, I tried to have the libretto as done as possible. So I spent, I think, almost a year on the libretto before writing any music. I wanted to make sure that the story, there was an arc to the story, the development of the characters would make sense. I learned so much from that experience. And being a fellow at the Composers and the Voice program was also very, very informative. We worked with Mark Campbell, who was a librettist, and it was very interesting to hear him say how a libretto is different from poetry. It's different from prose. It's different from a play, words in a play. So I think at the end of the day, it has to be compact enough and intelligible.
Yeah.
So I think cutting things down always, even, this word I don't need, even though it's a tiny little word, but it doesn't flow well. Really working meticulously like that, crafting every single line, every single sentence. How can I express the same thing but in fewer words? But it has to also sound and flow nicely because it's sung.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Micromaker by Loose Leaf Transmissions. We hope you enjoyed this brief glimpse into the inner workings of the creative life. If this resonated with you, be sure to check out the full conversation on Music Maker with Tyler Kline, a podcast exploring craft and process, philosophy and inspiration, and the honest, often messy parts of being an artist, creative uncertainty, purpose and identity, and resilience. You can find Music Maker wherever you get your podcasts or by visiting musicmakerpodcast.com.